Hi there, I'm the Mythkeeper. Welcome back to my channel. This is the second part of my video on the humans of Golarion, the world of Pathfinder. And this time we're going to start in Taldor and Cheliax and move our way south into Garundi and eventually east into Tian. We're going to cover all the ethnicities that we didn't cover in the last video, so if you haven't seen that video, be sure to go and check it out. Anyway, let's get into it.
Next, we continue south, now to Cheliax, Andoran, Taldor, and Galt. Two ethnic groups dominate this region, ethnic Taldans and ethnic Chelish. Both ethnic Chelish and ethnic Taldans claim descent from the ancient Aslanti, who were said to have dark hair and purple eyes. The unusual eye color was a recessive trait, rarely seen among both Taldans and Chelish, but the dark hair is common among both people. The Aslanti in Taldor mixed with local ancient peoples, and their descendants have bronze or olive skin, and the traditional brown or black hair. The Aslanti and Cheliax mixed with Ulfin and Nidalese people, retaining the dark hair, but often having paler skin. That said, the Chelish were conquered by the Taldans around 3000 AR when the Taldan Empire was at its height, and the two shared an empire, right up until the empire split in 4081. So in fact, the two ethnic groups are very close, as the two have had 1,000 years of mixing before the split. Chelish noble houses, in fact, often have old imperial Taldan names, which, as one might expect from the Roman Empire analogue of Golarion, often have a Latin sound to them. There isn't a very clear real-world analogue for Chelish ethnicity, as described in the source material, but the Taldans, as described, seem very much to be ethnically Italian. For the purposes of my game, I often tell my players to think of Cheliax, Andoran, Galt, and Taldor to be like Spain, France, Switzerland, and Italy, respectively. Though I know not every player is fond of these real-world comparisons in the fictional universe, I find that it works for my group. Regardless, Chelish and Taldan ethnicities are related groups, and just as with settled Varisians, because of intermixing with other regional groups, they are quite varied as peoples as well. One might consider this region as sort of generically Southern European. At least that's the way I kind of present it in my games. Culturally, they are also just as varied as they are ethnically. One shouldn't need to read that much of these respective nations' histories to understand that for these nations, culture is very much distinct from ethnicity, even more so than elsewhere. Here is a short summary of the current nations where Chelish or Taldan peoples are the predominant ethnic group. In Cheliax, the citizens live in an oppressive tyrannical regime, and the state religion is the worship of Asmodeus, the Lord of Hell. Andoran won a revolutionary war for freedom against Cheliax in 4669, so as a nation it's only 53 years old. However, it is the innersea region's first fledgling democracy. Galt, like Andoran, fought for independence and separated from Cheliax in 4640. Unlike Andoran, though, it never established a functioning government. It is now a failed state, locked in a perpetual state of anarchy. Taldor, meanwhile, is a decaying state, once the seat of power in the world, and still now clinging on to the memory of its imperial past. As you can see, these nations are so diverse that for these regions, culture is much more dictated by current politics than it is by ancestry. In addition to these current states, Chelish and Taldan descended people can be found all over the innersea region. Let's switch to a map that shows all the lands conquered by either the Taldan Empire or the Chelish Empire at some point in time. As you can see, Chelish and Taldan ancestry can be found almost everywhere, from the northern reaches of Avestan to quite far south into Garundi. For both Taldan and Chelish names, I would consider the character's station in life. The more noble a person, the more Roman-sounding you can go with a name. The less noble your character is, the more likely I would be to pick a name that draws its roots from one of the Latin languages but lacks Roman suffixes. For example, Mauritius Stephanos might be the name of my noble Chelish or Taldan character, but my low-born soldier might be Maurice Stephans, or even Maurice of Riverford, declining to take a family name altogether. Directly south from Taldor is Kadira. Kadira appears to be a small region on the innersea map, but it is in fact just the outer reaches of the vast Padishah Empire of Kelesh, which dominates much of south-central Kazmaran along the Obari Ocean's large Kardaji Bay. The empire may be the largest current empire in the world. The power of the empire has been supported for thousands of years through the exploitation of wishcrafting by bound genies, powerful elementalists, and esoteric mathematicians. Kelishites always have black hair and brown or even golden eyes, and men generally grow out their beards. They favor light, loose-fitting clothing adapted to the desert heat and sand, with fashions that feature heavily embroidered designs decorated with expensive items as a display of wealth and power. Headdresses, veils, and turbans are all common items of clothing to help keep the stinging sand out of eyes and hair. The most common faith among the Kelesh is the worship of Sarenrae. Prior to Osirian independence in 4609, the Keleshite Empire also extended into Garundi. Even to this day, Kelish people can be found in Osirian, in Thuvia, and as far south as Geb. The real-world analog for the Padishah Empire is likely the Abbasid Caliphate, which lasted from 750 AD to 1520 AD, a period often referred to as the Islamic Golden Age. At its height, the Islamic Empire included much of northern Africa and Central Asia. In the west, they conquered so far as Morocco and northern Spain, and in the east they conquered Pakistan and much of northern India. In Golarion, the Padishah Empire is of a similar size and scale to this, even though we see little of it on the map. For real-world inspiration for character concepts and naming, consider going to Arabic history and mythology for Keleshite characters. Next, let's move back west and follow the outer rim of Garundi between the Barrier Wall Mountains and the sea. The dominant ethnic group in this region are called the Garundi. Garundi are known for their strength and empathy, treating their neighbors with compassion and respect. The common language across most of this region is Osiriani. Like Chelish and Taldan regions, and also like North Africa in our own world, Garundi regions are melting pot regions, with Avestinian, Mwangi, and Keleshite peoples all mixing together. For this reason, it's hard to generalize the appearance of these people. According to the source material, their skin tones often range from dark brown to beige, and though many are described as having tall statures, broad shoulders, and high cheekbones, many also do not share all these features. Just as with Chelish and Taldan regions, local culture and custom is informed more by national and political identity than by ethnic identity. So let's discuss these nations in a little more detail as well, moving clockwise around this region. The Shackles and Mediogalti are havens for pirates, inhabited by a people who yearn for freedom above all else. Rahadum is a nation so deeply scarred by religious wars that here no gods may be openly worshipped, and no divine magic may be practiced. Thuvia is not a truly united nation, but a desert land comprising of 5 city-states of nominally equal power. Osirian, meanwhile, is the heir of an ancient legacy, and represents one of the oldest nations of mankind. Below Osirian we find Katapesh. Katapesh is a nation of trade, selling all conceivable goods, no matter how mundane or bizarre. Traders converge on the nation's bazaars from around the world, even from other planes. Nex is a nation once ruled over by a powerful archmage, who disappeared 4,000 years ago, and since it has been overseen by a variety of strange sects, arcane cabals, and cults of personality, each one claiming insight into what the archmage's plans were for his abandoned nation. Beneath it is Geb, a nation from which you are unlikely to have a character from, since it is ruled by a necromancer, and the vast majority of its population is now undead. Playing a Garundi offers tremendous options, because these regions are so varied and interesting. Let's move on. In the interior of Garundi, particularly around the Mwangi Expanse, and further south, are a variety of ethnicities that are collectively called the Mwangi. Within this broad category, the Mwangi people are further divided into 4 diverse subgroups: the Bekyar, the Bonuat, the Mauxi, and the Zenj. Mwangi skin tones range from black to dark brown to ochre, and they have black or dark brown hair. As a whole, the Mwangi ethnicity is a stand-in for sub-Saharan African ethnic groups in the real world. The subgroups are interesting too, and as someone that lived in Africa for some time, I must admit the analogs between the game world ethnicities and real world ethnicities are much less clear here than they are in some other places. That said, I've tried to do my best to give you some real world analogs here as well, just in case it prompts you to do your own research. The Zenj are believed to be the most common of the Mwangi ethnicities, living in hundreds of small tribes in the jungles and savannas of the Mwangi Expanse. Some of the tribes live in villages alongside the region's many rivers, while others are nomadic herders who graze their cattle or goats in the expanse's grasslands and hills. Jungle tribes tend to be patriarchal, while savanna tribes lean towards matriarchy. Many Zenge follow an ancient tradition of shamanism. I think the intent here is for the Zenge people to be inspired by West African peoples, especially the Hausa, Yoruba, and Igbo people. These are the three largest tribes in Africa, and the Zenge are the largest tribe in the Mwangi Expanse. The Mauxi hail from further north than the Zenge, coming from the Barrier Mountains and having settled not just south of the mountains, but north as well. The Mauxi are native to Rahadum and Thuvia, as well as more southern lands. The ruling caste of Thuvia includes Mauxi as well as Garundi people. Mauxi people are noted as being tall and sometimes have straight hair. Once again, I'm not sure, and there may not be a real-world parallel here, but I think the intent here might be to evoke Iromo, Somali, or other tribes from the Horn of Africa, rather than Central or Western African people. Meanwhile, the Bonuwat are seafarers, and as such are often the group most encountered by the outside world. The Mwangi found in ports such as Blood Cove or the Shackles tend to be Bonuwat. They are excellent fishermen and sailors. They worship a combined version of Gosre and Desna, which they call Shimye Magala. Based on this description, I think the closest real-world analog is probably the Akan tribe, another West African group, which number greatly in Ghana and the Ivory Coast. Finally, the Bekyar live in the southern reaches of the Mwangi Expanse, including the Desolation Cape and up to Sargava, and they are noted as being extremely tall, many reaching 7 feet in height. Because of the extreme height of the Bekyar, as well as the fact that they are ancestral enemies of the Zenge and are noted as worshipping dark gods or demons like Angazan, Dagon, and Zura, I think it's fair to say that like the Nidalese in Avestan, there is simply no real-world analog for these people. There are likely many more Mwangi people than this, but the map of the Innersea does not extend that far south, and there is much more to the continent of Garundi than is represented in the game world, which is focused on the Innersea region. Players should feel free to consider Mwangi characters from much further south if they want to develop their own unique Mwangi histories and identities. Let's zoom in on the peninsula of Senghor, just north of the old Chelish colony of Sargava, or modern-day Vudrani. Here, there is a people that ignorant foreigners sometimes confuse for a unique Mwangi subgroup, the Kaldaru people. The Kaldaru people that settled these lands actually made their way over the Great Arcadian Ocean almost 2,000 years ago. Though they have now heavily mixed with Mwangi locals, they retain some slightly different features and some differences in culture, fashion, and customs. They originally hail from Zopatl, a small secluded nation in southern Arcadia. And I believe they are Golarion's version of Aztec, Inca, or Mayan people. I haven't come across that much detail around the Kaldaru people, but they are mentioned in the second edition, and their unique history makes them an interesting ethnic group to explore if you want to try something a little different. Moving east from Garundi, there is a small island called Jalmaray. Just like Kadira represents just the outer reaches for the Keleshite Empire, so too does Jalmaray represent the furthest reaches of the Vudrani Empire. The Vudrani people typically have dark eyes, and skin tones that run from umber to tawny. Their hair is often black. The real-world analog for the Empire of Vudra is likely the Gupta Empire, and the Vudrani people are Golarion's version of South Asians. Despite the fact that Vudra is quite far away, the Vudrani people are well-traveled, and they can be found across the Innersea region. The Vudrani people have their own pantheon, and chief among these gods is Irori, god of enlightenment, self-perfection, knowledge, healing, and inner strength. Finally, let's move even further east than Vudra. We get to the lands of Tian. The people of this land are collectively called the Tian, and they speak Tian. The few Tian who migrated from their homeland to the shores of Avestan and Garundi are generally classed as a single ethnicity. The Tian people, however, come from an entire continent, and as such are not one united ethnicity, but many different ones. In Shaguang, we get the Tianye, who were descended from the people of the Shori Empire in Ije. They have inherited the darker skin and straight hair of their ancestors, and are strongly attuned to air magic. I don't believe there is a real-world analog for this group. In Hongal, we get the Tianla, a semi-nomadic group. Compared with other Tian ethnicities, they have curlier hair and paler skin, and consider the others' more sedentary lifestyle a sign of weakness. Their bodies are also generally more muscular and stockier, and they have moon-shaped faces. The real-world analog for this group are the Mongols. In the successor states, a collection of 16 small kingdoms and city-states that used to form the Empire of Lunghua, formerly the greatest nation on the continent of Tianxia, we get the Tianshu. Their culture is the oldest on the continent, predating even Earthfall, and is now broken into hundreds of small kingdoms and city-states. The real-world analog for this group is Han Chinese. These states also include a few further subgroups. The Tian Detang in Detangman, who are seen as light-hearted and full of wisdom, and who have an affinity for sorcery. Also, the Tian Huan in Huangot, a gentle land of peace, understanding, and diplomacy. In Mingkai, we get the Tian Min. According to lore, the Mingkai have a wide variety of eye colors, ranging from orange-red to green, violet, and blue, but also including the more common brown. The real-world analog for this group is Japanese along the peninsula, or perhaps Korean closer to the mainland. In Zahoi, we get the Tiandan. After a period of great prosperity, their culture is undergoing a golden age, which is exemplified in their ornately decorated pagoda temples, colorful dress, and spicy aromatic food. The real-world analogs for Tiandan are the mainland Southeast Asian nations, especially Myanmar, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam. Finally, in Minata, we get the Tianxing, who live in the great archipelago known as Minata, or the Wandering Isles. Their skin is darker than most other Tian people, and their hair often has a reddish tint. Green eyes are also much more common among the Tianxing than in the rest of the continent. The real-world analog for this group are the Southeast Asian archipelagos, particularly Indonesia, Malaysia, or the Philippines.
And that's it, all the time we have for today, folks. We covered all the humans of Golarion, and we're going to be covering elves, dwarves, gnomes, some other ancestries in some videos coming up. So if you enjoyed this content, please be sure to let me know. And if there's anything that you'd like to hear in particular, let me know in the comments below. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.